The Pacers finally get a win on the road, taking down the Sacramento Kings in Sacramento. TJ McConnell and Myles Turner both have huge weekends for the Pacers, despite some struggles for the whole team on Friday in Portland. And the Pacers, we got to talk about their backup point guard situation with Malcolm Brogdon on the shelf. Lots to talk about on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News. And today we are talking about a Pacers road win. I'm not kidding. They actually went into another team's building and played a close game and didn't find a way to blow it down the stretch like they did in Charlotte, like they did in Washington, like they did in Portland. Man, their road woes have been painful to start the season, but they closed out a close game today in Sacramento tonight. It was fascinating to see how this game shook out. It was a very defensive battle, which I did not expect for a game between the Indiana Pacers of 2021 and the Sacramento Kings, but that's what it was. So full credit to the Pacers. They finally got that road win. And got to talk about the big weekends for Myles Turner and T.J. McConnell. They were really helpful for a Pacers team that otherwise got some lethargic performances from the rest of their guys. And look, Malcolm Brogdon was sick all weekend. He couldn't play. And so the Pacers had to go with their reserve point guard rotation. They probably win in Portland if Brogdon isn't sick. And he's so sick to the point that he can't even go to shoot around and practice and stuff. So it must be pretty tough sickness. But I want to talk about Brad Wanamaker, and more specifically, what the Pacers can do to make his minutes go better, because he has not been sufficient as a third-string / reserve point guard with Brogdon out in these games. There needs to be a different solution there. So let's just jump right in. Lots to get to today. The Pacers get the road win, though. I think that's the story I want to start with in the biggest news about the team right now. I mean, they really needed a road win. They really needed a close win, too. I mean, their only close win was that Heat game. In overtime, their other two wins are big wins. So to just show that they could do it on the road to close out a team in a close game was big for this team. And they almost blew it. They were up late thanks to some really good, tough shot making from guys like TJ McConnell, Myles Turner in the lane, a really, really friendly roll or two for Caris LeVert in the fourth quarter. But they needed every bucket they could get in this game to squeak out this win. 94-91 over the Kings. LeVert led the way. He had 22. He was scoring the ball at least decently well, but it took him 22 shots to get there, right? He wasn't really getting to the line. He wasn't hitting his threes as well as you'd like from him. Davion Mitchell put him in jail. So they needed other guys to step up to carry them to get this win. And LeVert could score an ISO in the clutch, and the Pacers occasionally just cleared out his left side and let him go. And he scored 2 or 3 times doing that. But the guys who really stepped up, at least compared to your expectation, one was TJ McConnell for sure. I asked a lot of guys post-game about how good TJ McConnell was in this game, because normally his thing is he comes in and when he's the starter, he's going to distribute a lot more because he's got more reliable scoring teammates around him in the starting five. In this game, he was hunting for his own shot, right? He scored 18 points on only 13 shots. He hit he hit 2 free throws. I thought those were threes. He didn't take any threes, which kind of helps with his effectiveness. Still had 7 rebounds and 4 assists, right? So he still found other ways to be effective. So he was really good scoring on his own and getting to that fall-away 8-footer, that shot that he's so good at from last year that he abandoned for some reason in the first 5 or so games of the season. He went back to that, and he was really effective. The Kings, and Myles Turner said this after the game, which I thought was fascinating. He said, a lot of times with McConnell, teams are playing him like he's going to pass. So when he gets deep into the paint like that, guys actually kind of go at their man behind the arc or like on cutters, and that makes he has more space for that turnaround 8-footer, and it really showed in this game. He had a lot of opportunities to hit him, and took full advantage, shooting 61.5% from the field. And again, scoring the second most points for the Pacers as the starting point guard. We'll talk about him more next segment because his weekend was wonderful, but he was excellent really on both ends of this game. Darren Fox continues to just have a miserable season. 7 for 19 for him for only 17 points. He had 2 assists and 3 turnovers. It's very perplexing to see him struggle like this, but credit to both Wanamaker and McConnell for playing good defense on him throughout a lot of this game. And then Turner was excellent as well. You wouldn't know from him only scoring 12 points on 10 shots, but 15 rebounds, led the team by a mile, and the Pacers dominated the rebounding in this game. They needed every small advantage they could get. 54-33 win on the glass against Rashawn Holmes, who has kicked their butt on the glass in the past, and a decent Kings rebounding team, Alex Len off the bench. The Pacers just dominated the glass. It was an emphatic win for their bigs, getting those rebounds, and Turner was a huge part of that with his 15. His defense was excellent in this game. Carlisle had a ton of praise for him after the game, both because Turner hit 2 threes and was getting involved in the offense, had 3 assists as well. So he was a plus 22. We'll talk more about Turner later as well, but when he came in the game, it just completely shifted. The Kings' game plan was different. The way they tried to attack was different. The way the Pacers were able to score and defend was different, and that is all credit to Myles Turner. He's been playing better of late. Carlisle had a lot of nice things to say about the way he played in this game and the way he was impacting winning, and it really showed. Every time he came in, the Pacers went on a run. There was a point in the second quarter, I think, with about 7 minutes to go, Myles Turner checked in, and I can check the play-by-play really quickly, but the Pacers were like just a little bit ahead, I believe, at that point, maybe a little bit behind at the moment he checked in. Yeah, they were up by 2 when he came in, and then the Kings did not hit a shot until about the 2:30 mark in the quarter, and they were up 7 at that point. So he helped the Pacers go on a nice run during that time frame, buoyed their lead. He was excellent as well. Sabonis was really good offensively in this game. He's been playing better defense all season, but he was better offensively in this game. 17 points and 10 rebounds for him. Duarte contributed 15, and this was the smoothest Chris Duarte 15 of the season to me. He took very few forced off the dribble shots. They were all off of cuts, catch and shoot within rhythm of the offense more than the way he's been getting in the past. He still had a few of the Chris Duarte really tough step backs, or doesn't create a ton of space, but just drills it right in a defender's face-esque shots that make him so difficult to guard and such a threat. But this was the most within the rhythm of the team way Duarte has played all season. And early in the game, threw a skip pass to the corner for T.J. McConnell layup. I think it was the second bucket of the game for the Pacers, which it was really early, right? So maybe that was more open. Yes, it was the second bucket of the game. That's something I've been talking about with Duarte a lot this season, is if he just had one, not even a hard like advanced skip pass, just one like I'm skipping it over the roller to someone else on the opposite side of me, that forces the defense to at least think about closing in on him and the roll man and in those 2-man actions. And he's gotten a lot of tunnel vision this season despite being an awesome scorer. So having that one pass really opens up the way the defense can play. And immediately McConnell caught it and had a ton of room to get all the way to the basket and score. So all the starters, really, you got a lot of good things to say about them. If you watch this game, they were all excellent. On the bench, Torrey Craig's defense was huge. He was good on Harrison Barnes for much of this game. Barnes has been having a wonderful season. He was 6 of 15 from the field, only 1 of 6 from deep. Free throws really redeemed his game. Justin Holiday also played some solid defense at times on some of their better scorers. Tyrese Halliburton shot 50%, but still had a rough night. Davion Mitchell was 1 for 7. Justin Holiday was on him at times. Buddy Hield was the only real threat for the Kings. Off the bench, he had 17 points on a bunch of threes. But really, the top 7 for the Pacers in the absence of injuries all stepped up and played their role well in a way to this win. Jeremy Lamb returned from injury. He played 6 minutes as he works his way back all in the first half. Clearly wasn't 100%. Took 3 shots, didn't make any of them. Did get to the line once, though. And then Brad Wanamaker played some good defense and some really rough offense. Goga got his minutes with some foul trouble. And Keelan Martin continues to steal a couple minutes as a backup wing in the first half of some of these games to just get some guys rest. But it was mostly the top 7, and it was Carlisle's game plan that was credited by a lot of players that led the Pacers to this close road win. They talked about more than one guy, which was surprising that they credited Carlisle's game plan for really slowing it down. And it's not that the Kings are like this lightning fast team like they have been in past seasons when they were like a solid team a couple years ago when they were lightning fast, but they play quicker than a lot of teams. They have a lot of youth in general. They get into their stuff pretty fast. Luke Walton's a slower paced coach than they've had in the past, but they just have fast guys. Carlisle really slowed the game down in a way that the Pacers haven't done in a while. 83 shots for the Pacers, 84 for the Kings. That's lower numbers this season in general. So a lot of credit to Carlisle's game plan. But this game was dominated by the minutia. It's so weird to look at some of the stats of this game where the Pacers coughed it up 19 times, 19 turnovers. They had 24 fouls. Right? They They had a lot of silly mistake stuff. They only had 13 assists on 37 made shots. In general, you think of that as a poor indicator of offensive success and sharing the ball. The Pacers only got 10 points from their bench. They only they just a lot of stuff that was bad. They had 0 fast break points. I didn't even notice that. 0 fast break points, right? If you looked at all those stats or you told me those stats were going to be the case before the game started, no chance I think the Pacers win. But that's what happens when you dominate the glass, like I said earlier, 54-33, ridiculous domination of the glass, and you get those second chance points, and you make a lot of your steals, right? Even though the Pacers had a ton of turnovers, the Kings only had 7 points off of those turnovers, whereas the Pacers had 24 off of theirs, and they shot better. Amazingly, they held the Kings to poor 3-point shooting, so they were able to succeed despite a ton of weirdness in this game. So the Pacers didn't even play that well, but they found a way to get a road win. That's going to be big for this team. They're only 4-7, but getting a close road win when you haven't been able to all season, finally the confidence booster they need. They really could have used that Portland win where they were up late by 9, I think, with under 5 minutes to go. That would have been a big confidence booster since Portland's pretty good, but they did get one of their key weekend wins. So let's talk about two guys who really stepped up this weekend and are kind of hitting their stride in the Carlisle system and in this current Pacers aura that's going on. T.J. McConnell and Myles Turner. But before we do that, I got to talk to you guys about two great groups of people. First up, the good folks over at Prize Picks, because Prize Picks has the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. They offer more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. They offer any prop you can think of: yardage, touchdowns, interceptions thrown, you name it, they've got it. All the users that deposit and just use this promo code that I'm about to say will get a 100% instant match on their deposit up to $100. That code is just NBA. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections. You can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. You can do multi-sport entries. You can use their award-winning app Store and Google Play, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com and use the promo code, like I said, NBA, just NBA, or go to your app store, download that app today. Prize Picks is fantasy made easy. And I also want to tell you guys about the good people over at Directv. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, and another place you're watching the sports highlights, and you got your phone to tie some of this all together. That's all very confusing. There's a much easier way to get all this together without any hassle, and that is Directv Stream. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter, get rid of all the confusion and the many devices, and get your TV together with Directv Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Full credit to T.J. McConnell this weekend. We're starting with him in this section where we talk about Myles Turner and T.J. McConnell. Thank you for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today in the podcasting world. And also, I think I'm going to cut them all out, and I will do my absolute best. But I threw out my back this weekend because apparently I'm 70 years old. So that means I'm making some uncomfortable noises when I shift in my chair. And I will try to edit them all out, but if you catch them, I apologize. T.J. McConnell is not an old guy with a thrown out back because he was excellent this weekend. Against Portland, he stepped up in ways that you don't expect T.J. McConnell to step up. First of all, ironically, I think T.J. McConnell was 8 for 13 exactly in both of these games. He was 8 for 13 against Portland, and he was 8 for 13, yes, he was, against the Sacramento Kings. So very consistent play from a guy stepping into this point guard role. And I know I already talked about how Myles Turner described him as more of a self-starter this weekend. He only had 2 assists against Portland, and he only had 4 assists against the Kings, right? So calling T.J. McConnell more like the old T.J. McConnell isn't like he's distributing or finding guys on cuts in the ways he used to or being that inbounds pest. It's just he's getting really deep in the paint and looking to shoot. Like in the first couple games, he was taking a lot more threes and not really getting into the paint. He took 4 threes against Portland, to be fair. He took 0 against the Kings. So the 3-point volume isn't alone here, but he was just looking to pass or wasn't, it was just, I don't know, he was trying to set something up specifically instead of just keeping his options open, I think is how I would describe it early in the season. And now he knows what he wants. Or he's keeping those options open, and he knows where they are and what he can do. And like I said, it takes him a while in a new system to figure out his teammates and what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. And now I think he's got that figured out. And that's why he's able to, okay, all my options are cut off since I know where they are. I can immediately pull up for the fadeaway 8-footer. I can find this cutter here. I can reset. And he's got the baseline angles down that he didn't have early in the season when he was coughing up a few more turnovers. He had that 4 turnover game in Toronto, 3. Well, he struggled against Toronto specifically, 2 against Milwaukee in that game. They were really tight late. And right, he had some just rougher turnover games early that he's cleaned that up a little bit as well before this Kings game where he had 4. So he's just getting better at figuring out what he's supposed to do and how he can impact winning, and obviously playing more with Brogdon out to help there. But he's just more of a threat now than he was early in the season. Now that he's got those options down, and he knows how he can be the most effective in this Carlisle system. And teammates have credited him for looking for his own shot a little bit, right? Because like Turner said, the pass is always expected, but even LeVert said, like, no one, because they don't expect it, it's just such an added bonus for us. Like, it makes our lives easier too. And just having another guard who can score off the dribbles, obviously such a boon for any team. I always talk about how important lead guard play is. So it was fantastic for the Pacers to see T.J. McConnell playing like this all weekend. They've been begging for him to be a little better all season, excuse me. At least I have, specifically because that's a big part of their bench being so good. And when he's a starter, it's different, but they've needed him to be a little better, and he really was this weekend. 19 points against Portland. He hit 3 of 4 threes in that game, which doesn't sound like much, but because it's early in the season and small sample sizes are crazy, TJ McConnell is now shooting 40% from 3 this season. Wow, I still don't think he should shoot as many as he is. 4 in a game is crazy, but if you make 3 of them, you make 3 of them. He was one made layup with about 30 seconds left against Portland away from having a fantastic weekend. That would have put them ahead very late in that game. He just couldn't get it to go, and Portland scored on the other end. But really an excellent weekend for him, as he has really found his groove with this Pacers team, and I think that that's going to be very helpful for them. And, easing LeVert into certain roles, right? Like LeVert's struggling a little more than he was right after he returned with this team, and having McConnell be another threat has really helped, because if LeVert was struggling and McConnell was still in his early season form, the Pacers would have been doofed this weekend. They would not have had enough ways to score and set up other guys on this team to score. So they needed this at this time because of what was going on with LeVert and his struggles, but they also needed it because McConnell himself needed to round into form. So 19 points on Friday, 18 points on Sunday for TJ McConnell. He looks a lot better than he did early in the season. Hopefully that's something that can continue if Brogdon is sick, or just in general if he continues to be the backup point guard. Because even when he was the backup against San Antonio, right, 10 points, 10 assists on that Monday game. And then, he didn't. Brogdon, did not play in that game. But against the Knicks, he was also the backup, 5.6 assists. That 6 assists was his third most of the season. So definitely rounding into form for McConnell. Myles Turner also really hit some sort of stride. I don't know when it clicked for him, but ever since that home Toronto game that they barely lost, even including that game when he had a double-double, 19 points against the Spurs, then that 3-point setting night for him when he hit 7 at home against the Knicks, had 25 points, 16 points against Portland over the weekend, and played some excellent defense in that game. And then was just ridiculous in this game, plus 22, like I said, 15 rebounds against the Kings, 12 points, completely changed the game. His plus-minus continues to be very standouty. Like, even in games they lose, he's a plus. They lost to Brooklyn, they were plus 11 with him on the court. They lost to Toronto, they were plus 3 with him on the court, right? They lost to Washington, they were plus 3 with him on the court in his 40-point game. He continues to be good. The solo Turner minutes, like last year, it's too early in the season for me to do anything on like lineup plus minus. That's a dangerous game, although I'm going to talk about it a little bit in the next segment, but mostly you'll see why. But in general, the solo Turner minutes continue to look pretty good. Carlisle has found a nice second unit, even with Brogdon out, but not even always with Brogdon out. That features Justin Holiday and Torrey Craig and Turner, and then a variety of other guys have been mixed into that unit. McConnell has been in there as the 1. Duarte at the 2, I think, was what it was a lot this weekend. That is excellent defensively, and has just enough shot creation and shooting, especially now that Turner's willing to put it on the floor, to be really solid. And Turner's a great fit for that group, and a little more passing from him. 4 assists in that Toronto game that I talked about, where he was a plus 3, 2 against Portland. These are small numbers, but for him, they're big steps forward. 3 against the Kings. He put it on the floor and kicked it to TJ McConnell for a corner 3 against Portland, which was a sequence you never thought you would see. So like McConnell, Turner's really rounding into his form too. Like, after a couple of games, I think the Toronto game in Toronto, he played 22 and a half minutes, and the Pacers got waxed in Toronto. That was clearly their worst performance of the season by an absolute mile, right? And people were kind of wondering after that game, why isn't Turner playing more, both in fourth quarters of close games and in general? And since then, Carlisle's turned to him much more. He's played a ton of minutes, or almost 30. In all their competitive games, he's played over 30 minutes. When they blew out the Spurs and Knicks, he played a little bit less because they didn't need him in the fourth and they turned to Goga more. But he's playing more consistently and he's playing down the stretch and he's still having that impact. He's finding ways to get more involved, whether that's putting it on the floor. He's hitting his threes a lot better in that stretch as well, which is certainly a factor in his effectiveness. His defense looks great. His blocks are still excellent and up this season. So he's really found, at the same time as McConnell, his stride as well. I think those two guys turning from more into solid starters, role players, whatever you want to call that role, to like very sizable contributors has been, the Pacers, they went 3-1 this week. It was clearly their best week of the season. Big part of that turnaround, and they were really close to having a 4-0 week, has been McConnell and Turner really finding their groove. And the way I said it with McConnell on Twitter, and I'd kind of apply this to Turner as well, because Turner had some nice stretches last season, is they're looking like the player we know them to be, right? Turner clearly had that 40-point out of his shell game. And so maybe he definitely looks like a better player this year. But they're both looking like the guys, especially McConnell, that they're playing the way that we know they can be effective in playing. And instead of early in the season where it felt like at times they were kind of out of their game or out of their element trying to do stuff they aren't used to yet. So they're looking like the player we know them to be. And for a Pacers team that's trying to get better, having them be playing at the level that they can play at has been very refreshing. It's been helping this team. And 4-7 is not some awesome record, but 4-7 when your team is finally figuring out what they can do, and it's like 3 bounces of the ball away from 6-5 or whatever. They have so many close games, it's almost painful. They really only have one game that they lost where they weren't right there. And I know that is such a stupid way to look at a 4-7 team, because they're 4-7 for a reason. But now that they have these guys kind of rounding into form and figuring out their roles better, and knock on wood, if Brogdon can kick this sickness, whatever it is, it's non-COVID, but if he can kick this sickness by Wednesday, have a mostly healthy team now that Jeremy Lamb is back as well, perhaps that could turn things a little bit in their favor into a way that they could go on a run. They've got a really tough back-to-back coming up this week. If Brogdon can't come back, though, we're going to see more Brad Wanamaker as the backup point guard behind T.J. McConnell. And we got to talk about what's going on with those minutes. I don't want to just completely dump on Brad Wanamaker. He's not an irredeemable player. I think that we'll just talk about it. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. But before we do that, let's talk about the good folks over at Built Bar, because Built Bar is making the best tasting protein bars ever. If you've listened to Locked On Pacers before, you know what Built Bar is. I love Thanksgiving, all the good foods and treats, and there's plenty of them. But maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar. It's the perfect time for Built Bars. They've got holiday dessert flavors that are all delicious and something to feel good about. One slice of pie has 300 calories or more, and that's on the low end. Built Bars are only 130 calories with plenty of protein, and they're the same flavors. Replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of raspberry pie. Again, low calorie, low carb, low fat, but high protein, 100% covered in real chocolate protein bars. Perfect substitute for those sweet desserts. Perfect substitute for a meal at work, or a perfect healthy snack. I've used it in all of these settings before. You've got to try them. They'll have new flavors coming in all month at Built.com. Go check out the site often. Go to Built.com, and when you check out, use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, that promo code is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you again for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today. Brad Wanamaker was really rough in this Kings game. He was a -5. That doesn't sound so bad in 11 minutes. 0 for 1 from the field, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 very ugly turnovers. I think that a lot of the couple things. First thing I think is turnovers are all live ball and really bad. Like, they're really aggressive or ambitious passes, and they always lead to something for the other team, or typically, which makes them look way worse than other players' turnovers, which makes him look a little bad. But he's also ineffective at like getting by a lot of guys. He doesn't set up much. He's kind of just a nominal point guard. So he clearly is in a weird fit. It's hard to describe, but just he doesn't look good a lot. And I was talking with Derek Kramer from my Pacers blog, who was on the show last week. Go check that show out if you want. We've been talking about Brad Wanamaker and what to do with those minutes, because when he's just the backup one and he's asked to run the offense and create a little bit, it doesn't go very well, right? He's not really that guy. But I have talked about a few times a couple things. One, he is decent off the ball. He's a decent off-ball player. He's still shooting 42.9% from three this season, right? That's something he's good at. He can hit his free throws if he gets an advantage to get to the line. Like, he's got some redeemable qualities in the game, and he's pretty stocky for his short size. So his defense is okay, right? He's not like a useless, completely useless player. What he isn't, he's clearly a low-end backup. With like low-end backups are in the NBA. That's an NBA level player. I think what the problem is he's not a point guard. So when you have a guy playing in a role that he's already at his max in as a backup, and he's out of position, you're going to get a guy who looks like a replacement level player at best. Like against Portland, he was decent. I'll give him credit. He was decent. He played 17 minutes in that game, 5 points, 6 assists, like really made an impact. He was actually good in that game. They put him in to be the backup with Brogdon out, and he did a good job. But that was his first like noticeable impact on a game to me for a lot of the season. He was okay at times this week. He didn't play against the Knicks because Brogdon was back, but like he played a bunch against the Spurs and was okay in that game. But really, like a lot of times, he's been a minus on the court every game except for the Nets game. Against the Nets, and in that game, he was 0 for 5 with 2 assists and 2 turnovers. So, he's just struggled to be effective. And I just think I'm going to say a couple things. One, I think it's because he's just playing the wrong position. Like if he's just off ball, it's okay. Even in this game where he was a minus whatever against the Kings, I already said it and I forget. When he was in the game with LeVert, only air quotes, a -3. They won by 3, so obviously they would have liked those minutes to go better. Their shot quality was pretty good, right? Their expected field goal percentage per playbyplaystats.com on the shots they got in that stretch, 65%. That's very good, right? So they were creating good looks with that unit in the game. Why do I point out that unit? Because, like I said, I just don't think Brad Wanamaker is a point guard. So I think if he's in, have him with one of McConnell or LeVert. The problem is the point of having him be the backup is you have to rest McConnell at some point. You can't play him the whole game. He'll be just completely exhausted. So playing them at the same time is very hard from a rest standpoint. But what you can do is play them together a little bit so that LeVert's now resting, and then bring LeVert in for McConnell. Now you have McConnell resting, but you still have a guy in Karis LeVert who can initiate, who can run a pick and roll, who can start the play or see the action unfold and hit a timely pass in a way that Wanamaker can't. And then Wanamaker's off ball, where he actually has shown he can have a little bit of impact and he can still guard the point guard. I just think the Pacers have to make a big effort on having him be paired with someone who can actually create a shot for someone else on this team, because the solo minutes when he's the only point guard are just so rough. I mean, you look at just this lineup when they did a lineup that was Wanamaker, Duarte, Craig, Holiday, Sabonis, -6 in a minute and 52 seconds, right? That's like unacceptably bad almost for a team that is trying to win these games, these close games. Wanamaker, Lamb, Holiday, Goga, Sabonis was -3 in 29 seconds. Like it's only one possession basically. You're kind of splitting hairs at that point, but just when you have him in with, like, Sabonis can create using screens, but Wanamaker's not a point guard, so you don't want him to run pick and roll that much. And like Duarte can create for himself, but you need a guy who can be a creator in general, and like LeVert and McConnell can do that, and Wanamaker can't. So I think the solution to having him be the backup point guard is not, people rush to say get him out of the rotation. And like, yeah, that if they had a person they could play that I think would be better than him as a backup one, I would suggest that. But the thing is, then you're down to 2A guys. You're already at the back of the roster. They don't have anyone else. Remember how much I was talking about backup point guards in free agency? I was very surprised they didn't sign one. This is why. Like they could go to DeJean Jarreau, who's with the Mad Ants. Their season started this weekend, by the way. I'll talk about them at some point on the segment this week. Or Dwayne Washington, maybe, but he's not a point guard at all. Then you're running into the same problem where you still need another creator in the game. So that doesn't really work to me. So I think for now, you got to try something, because his minutes have not been effective when he's the solo guard or initiator. So I think what the Pacers need to do is try to make a big effort on making sure one of McConnell LeVert is in at the same time as him, just so they can be sure and certain that they're not just shooting themselves in the foot, even if it's only for 5 or 6 minutes a game where he's your only point guard. Like I just went through those lineups that was only like 2.5 minutes where they lost by 6 points, right? When he was the solo creator. You just can't have that. And so I think that, look, he's had games where he's been at least effective enough that you get why he's out there, right? He's that, like, a low end backup isn't a good player, but a low end backup is still an NBA level player that is on a roster for 4 straight seasons in the NBA for a reason. Like, that's above replacement level. There's a difference. And he's had games at that level. We're not shooting for a high bar here. I just think that they can achieve the bar easier, where it's okay if he's in your rotation, if he's sharing the floor with the shot creator who can actually help the rest of the team. That's a very nitty gritty way to describe a problem that only befalls the team for 5 to 10 minutes a game, but those minutes are just going so poorly that I think the Pacers need to try something. I don't think Brad Wanamaker is awful. I think the role they have him in makes him look awful and sets him up for failure. You know, we saw with the Warriors and the Hornets last year, he always, not always, but often at least, played alongside another creating guard on those teams, right? So I think that the Pacers need to try to do that as well. I think that could set him up to be a much more effective player for this team for the rest of the season when they do need him. And they might not need him if Brogdon can return by Wednesday. We'll see. He's still sick. But I think that that is a way the Pacers can set themselves up for more success in stretches that have been hurting them this season. That's all I have for today's show. It was a fun weekend of Pacers basketball despite the Portland loss. I kind of sometimes hate those Friday night games because that get buried when there's another weekend game, because I don't get a good chance to talk about them, but there'll be opportunities to bring up themes from that game like I did today. With other players tomorrow, Brendan Rourke from Pacers.com will be joining the show. Should be super fun to talk with him. And then Tuesday, holy cow, the Pacers have 2 days off in a row. I'm going to have some fun figuring out who I want to have on the show. Maybe a Nuggets guy, maybe a Jazz guy. It's going to be a fun week. They have 2 really tough and fun games against league contenders. So I'll make sure to give those games all the due praise they have. Should be at least 2 or 3 guests this week. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you had a great weekend, and we will see you tomorrow.